Hello everyone and welcome back to Towergate. It is Towergate Day number 1252, September the 28th, 2020, Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so we have a really big week coming up this week. We had a couple things over the weekend that occurred, so let's go ahead and get to that. Obviously, this week coming up, we have the debate on Tuesday evening, assuming that Sleepy Joe shows up to the debate. Again, until I actually see him standing there on that stage, I'm just not going to be sure it's going to happen. And I think if there was any way that they could avoid it, they would have. I think that they've just looked at the possible options and realized there's just not a good option. Not showing up to the debate, I think, would doom Biden for sure. I think maybe they feel they're better off to roll with it and just hope to God that Biden doesn't make any major gaffes. And I'm sure they've been spending a lot of time with him. That's why he's been taking all these days off. It's been to try to work with him to keep him from melting down or having a brain freeze or gaffing up or whatever. I think that that's the reason why he's taken so many of these days off in the month of September, is to get him prepared for the debate so he doesn't totally wipe out. If he just shows up and doesn't do anything too bad, it's probably considered a win. So I think that is a definitely a critical event that will go down here tomorrow night. And of course, that morning, Tuesday morning, the morning of the debates, is the court hearing for with Sidney Powell, Judge Sullivan, and they're going to be addressing the most recent revelations, the 40 pages of FBI notes that were given to Sidney Powell approved by Attorney General Barr for release, but cultivated by Jeff Jensen from his interview with the FBI case agent. So that's two big things happening. And then, of course, on Wednesday, we have the slimy weasel, Jimmy the Weasel Comey, will be testifying. I don't think we're going to learn a whole lot there. We'll see how they hold his feet to the fire, if they do hold his feet to the fire, but I don't expect Comey, he's not going to incriminate himself. I think he's going to give a lot of waffly type answers and try to avoid answering as many questions as possible. And if he gets an opportunity, obviously, I think that it's looking to me like it's going to be Peter's been stroking us and his little group around him that they're going to try to throw under the bus. I think the rest of them will circle the wagons, the political people, Comey, Rice, Lynch, Yates, and the political appointees by Obama will try to circle the wagons, and they'll try to throw, number one, Peter's been stroking us under the bus. I think they will throw Andy McCabe under the bus as well if they have to. I think that they'll try not to, but I think that they won't be able to help avoid that either. But I think that that's what Comey is probably going to be trying to do, is trying to save his skin, and we've seen this from him before, blame it on people below him and pretend that he didn't know what was going on. I think that that's, or that information was withheld from him. I think that is pretty much what you're going to see Comey try to do. How effective he'll be able to do that, I don't know. There's a lot of things that can blow him up there. So he's a pretty slick weasel. He's been doing this kind of thing for a very long time. So we'll just have to wait and see how that turns out. But those are major events that are happening this week. Now, on Sunday morning, Maria Bartiromo stated at the opening of her show that she has sources that are telling her that there will be no action from Barr or Durham before the election. So that's got a lot of people really twisting in the wind. I certainly was not happy to hear that, but I'm not surprised. And it's as I've been saying now for the past 2 weeks. I don't think that they want to come out and drop anything in October. I said if they're going to drop anything, it will be by the end of September. And we're just about there. If something doesn't drop in the next day or two, it probably isn't going to happen. And that's probably better, because anything that drops in the month of October is automatically going to be cast off as just political dirty trick, and that can backfire and work against you. It may end up having a negative impact. We may not even want that to occur. as far as Maria Bartiromo and how solid her sources are, I don't think she has any source inside the Durham investigation. I don't think that she's got a direct line to Barr. The Barr spokesperson, Carrie Kupek, has looked at her Twitter feed. There's nothing there. So normally, if there was some sort of an announcement like that, it would be there, but it's not. So I don't know. I don't know who Bartiromo's sources are, but I would say it's probably accurate that if we don't see something by Tuesday, by the end of the month, I think it's not going to happen until after the elections, and that's bad. I mean, Barr came out and said that there would be some sort of a report that the American people would know what happened. He said that to Sean Hannity on his show. We all saw it. At the time, if you remember, my comment was that I was very surprised that he would say that. An interim report's not something you usually see in the middle of an investigation. I understand the special circumstances as it relates to the election and everything. I think that's the point that Hannity was making. I think Barr has heard that from a lot of people, that, hey, you have to make sure people know what happened before they vote again. And I think Barr, to a large extent, agrees with that. But as I said when he was on Sean Hannity that night, I would think that Durham is going to push back very, very hard on that. If you're a U.S. attorney, prosecutor, you really don't want to come out and do a report halfway through your investigation and say what you know and what you don't know, what you've learned and what you haven't learned. That's just... It doesn't, and certainly with Durham, a guy who we know doesn't leak, doesn't do any of that kind of stuff. I would think that it's possible that Barr really did want to put out an interim report because of the pressure he's feeling on that side, but he may have had a conversation with Durham, and Durham may have really put up a fight, said, "Nah, we can't be doing that. I mean, that compromises my investigation. That's a big problem." So I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, but clearly there's a disconnect between Barr and Durham, because Barr wouldn't have gone out on Sean Hannity's show and said, "Yeah, we're going to make sure people know. We'll put out some sort of an interim report," and then renege on that. It's not a good move. It's not a good look. I'm sure he's going to take heat over it, whether or not he comes back out and does some media appearances in the next few days and explains what's going on with that, if he's asked about it or whatever. We'll just have to wait and see. But I just don't know. But I do think that if they can't get something out, indictment, a couple indictments, charges, plea deals, something by Tuesday or so, by the end of the month, I don't think it'll happen in October. And it's probably better that it doesn't, to be honest with you. I think that could cut both ways. That could certainly be used against Trump and Republicans. The Democrats would have a field day with that, to try to say, well, see, here's Trump and Barr, and they're using the power of the government to go after Trump's political enemies, and they do it right before the election, October surprise style thing. See how dirty they are. So, I mean, I can see how the left would spin that. And there's just too many balls in the air right now, too many crazy things going on to throw another variable into the equation, which is an unknown variable at this time, how that would play, how it would cut. I think there's a lot of political risk. And I know some people say, well, if Biden were to win the election, then the whole thing would be swept away. Well, I think in a large degree that's probably true. But, once the election's over, there's still about 6 weeks before a new administration would come in. It would take some time to fire Barr, to get someone else in there, to bring in someone who would take control of the Durham investigation and shut it down. And so there would still be a few weeks, about a month and a half after the election, that Barr and Durham would have to take some action to make sure the investigation doesn't get shut down, or to make sure that they at least ways charge the people that they absolutely have solid cases against. And of course, with the revelations from this FBI case agent, we now know that they do have a star witness who can testify firsthand of the bias that was going on. So the story before was, yeah, you got all these text messages, you got the emails, you got the actions that they took, but there was no political bias. That was just us having conversation. The investigation was totally legitimate. There was no political bias. There was none of that going on. It was all, predicated, whatever. Well, Barr and Durham have already come out and told us they didn't think it was properly predicated. We now know from recent document releases that all 4 of the FISA warrants were illegal. We now have a first-hand, deep inside of both of those investigations. The case agent for the Flynn case, who also was on the Mueller team, giving testimony. And that's not all of the testimony. We just got a portion of it. There's more. And some of that's going to be released this week as well. Basically saying, oh no, I was right there, total political bias. It was get Trump, it was get Flynn. There was never anything really there. I was the case agent. I can tell you, I told them there's nothing here, there's no criminal wrongdoing. We should shut this down. He tried to do it twice. He was overruled. He was then put on the outside. I mean, so you now have the star witness to blow up the whole, there was no bias or no going after Trump. They got their star witness. They got what they need to go in and testify to a grand jury or in front of a regular jury or what have you, enough to make sworn statements that would certainly be slam dunks for Durham to bring charges against Strzok, Page, McCabe, and the whole crew that was involved in that. So, I mean, they've got the goods. And I think they're in pretty good shape. But I guess my thoughts are right now is that the 2 most important things to think about, even though I'm very disappointed that we did not get, or have not gotten, probably won't get, a report or any indictments before the election. I'm very frustrated about that. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, just the Chinese virus threw the brakes on everything. D.C. is still basically locked down. In fact, there was just a story in the Washington Examiner this weekend about whether or not D.C. will ever come back because it's been locked down for so long. It is literally a ghost town in D.C. So I think that they're being very hindered by China virus. And I expect that shortly after the election, a lot of that's going to go away very quickly. I think after the election, a lot of the coronavirus thing is going to die down very quickly. And I think things should get pretty close back to normal as far as seating grand juries, conducting interviews, and being able to move, around and do things like that within D.C., which is where some of these people are working from Durham's office. So I think the 2 most important things right now is, number 1, absolutely critical, got to get Judge Amy Coney Barrett seated on the court before the election. That is, to me, the most important thing. More important than indictments, more important than, a report or anything like that about Spygate. Most important thing, get Judge Barrett seated before we vote. Preferably 2 or 3 weeks before we vote, so that they can challenge some of these states, particularly swing states, where they're going to allow this late balloting, late ballot harvesting, 2-3 weeks before they have to have the votes in. I think that all that needs to be challenged before we vote, which means you want to have this judge seated 2 to 3 weeks before. So that looks like they got it on the fast track, that it could be done so that she could be confirmed with 2.5-3 weeks to spare before we vote. That will give them time to hopefully get an emergency Supreme Court ruling on some of these states, because if you look at these states where the Democrats are getting these judges to go along with this stuff, it's in these key swing states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. There's like 6 states where they're really focusing, because those are the states that are going to decide the election. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I don't think there's any challenges here in Ohio, and I haven't heard about anything going on in Florida. But there's about 5, 6, 7 states. Arizona, I think, is one. They're key states. They're all swing states. They're states that are going to decide the election. That's where a lot of this shenanigans are being played out. I think that they want to challenge that before we vote and try to get a ruling before the vote so they can shut this down and keep the Democrats from stealing the election, because they're not going to win it in the vote. They're going to try to steal it in the courts. So I think the most important thing is getting Judge Barrett seated on the court, preferably with 2 to 3 weeks to spare before we vote. That is key. The second most important thing, of course, is winning the election. And that's the two things to me right now that are absolutely the most important. After the election, then the most important thing will be, again, getting the criminals indicted. And I do believe that it's going to happen. I don't believe, a lot of people say, well, nothing's going to happen or whatever. I don't believe nothing's going to happen. Whether or not we get everything we want, I don't know. But the idea that nothing's going to happen, I don't think that that's true. Durham, would not have drugged this investigation out for as long as he did, extend it through the election. If he really had nothing now, he would know it. He would know it. And they would come out and say, okay, well, we've looked at it. There was a lot of things done that shouldn't have been done, a lot of policy procedure violations. We don't feel like there's anything we really could charge anyone with, an actual crime, but there needs to be reform, there needs to be this, there needs to be that, whatever, and people get off the hook. But the fact that they're not doing that, the fact that they're going to extend this investigation beyond the election, and it's already been going on for now, 19, almost 20 months, tells me Durham wouldn't be putting all this time and resources into this investigation to come out and say, well, I spent 2 years, 2.5 years, whatever, found nothing I can charge anybody with. I don't think that's the case. I think there are going to be serious indictments. I think still, as I said before, 2 to 3 dozen. And I think there'll be serious charges against some people. I think it continues to gain more evidence. I think that will happen. Very disappointed it didn't happen before the election, or at least it doesn't look like it's going to happen before the election. We could all be wrong. Who knows? But that's the way it looks right now. So I would say the priorities right now is to get the judge seated on the court as soon as possible, because the election's the most important thing, and the election's probably going to be decided in the courts. We need to make sure that we've got Barrett seated before those cases are brought to challenge what's going on in these 6, 7 states where they're going to try to steal the election. So I think that that's most critical. And then after the election, we can go back to locking down and focusing on getting the perpetrators held accountable for their crimes. Now, there's something else. I think there may have been some sort of a deal cut with Barr and Durham, because releasing those 40 pages of FBI notes, the 302 notes from the interview that just occurred a week ago. That interview just occurred on the 25th between Jeff Jensen and it was Jeff Jensen, another assistant U.S. attorney, and 2 FBI agents were the ones who conducted that interview with this FBI case agent. And the fact that that Durham was okay with Barr approving the release of that to get to Sidney Powell and other things. Of course, they released the documents last week, 2 weeks ago, from the FISA court with the 6 questions that the DOJ, on behalf of Durham, were asking for, things they wanted. They got everything they wanted, all 6. And of course, it was in that document release that we learned that the FISA courts now determined all 4 of the Carter Page FISAs were illegal. And I do believe, from what Lindsey Graham said, there's going to be some even more damaging information that's going to be dropped this week. So I think it looks like to me that there may be some compromise going on here between Barr and Durham. And it looks like maybe they're not going to come out with an interim report or drop any indictments on anybody between now and Election Day, but it looks like they are going to start releasing some really seriously damaging documents, because what they just released last week was absolutely the most damaging thing that we've seen in a very, very long time. An FBI agent, case agent, on the inside, first-hand witness to what was actually going on, and what was actually going on was a lot of bias. It was a get Trump, get Flynn atmosphere. There was no predication. There was no evidence ever to continue or pursue any of it. That guy's star witness number 1. You could bring him in to court, and you could probably go to court and get convictions just based on that. That was a major, major drop. Do not underestimate how big that was. And just 2 weeks before that, learning all 4 of the FISAs were illegal. And more coming out this week. So I think it looks like what they're going to do here is that maybe not an interim report, but maybe Durham is going to sort of reluctantly agree to allow some things to be released that are devastating, that will essentially prove that beyond the shadow of a doubt, it was in fact a coup attempt, a witch hunt on both Flynn and Trump, and that they'll release documents that will show this so that it will be out in the public domain, so that now the corporate media is going to ignore it all, but there's plenty of other media that people pay attention to who will not ignore it. And so we will learn a lot more, and Lindsey Graham says what's coming out this week's more damaging than anything we've seen so far. And if it's any more damaging than what we just learned from this FBI case agent, I mean, I don't know how much more damaging you can get than that. I mean, the guy, the most inside guy you can think of, coming out and dropping that information, I mean, that's slam dunk right there. He's your star witness. He can take down the entire Mueller team, can take down the top tier of the FBI and DOJ. Just that one guy. If there's things more damaging than that, I'm looking forward to seeing that. So I think that's what we're going to see between now and Election Day. Probably not going to see an interim report. Likely will not see any charges. But I think what we are going to see is a lot of evidence that's going to be dropped, put out in the public domain for everyone to chew on. And I think that that's probably the compromise. It looks like a compromise has been reached, and that looks like what we're going to get. May not make everyone happy, but maybe it's the best thing. I know Ron Johnson seemed very, very agitated on Maria Bartiromo. Very, very agitated. And he says that Ratcliffe needs to do some serious declassifying of documents over the next couple of weeks so that people know what happened. So there's 2 ways to learn what happened. Either Barr can come out with a report, or they can just drop the documents and let us read it for ourselves. I can go either way. Both are good. Both are better than nothing. Neither are as good as indictments and a wrap-up of the investigation. So, anyhow, I think we just have to continue to do what we have been doing. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard for me. I've been doing this for a very long time. And it's hard for all of you. Hard for all of us. Because we just want this thing, it just seems like it shouldn't take this long. We know what happened. We know who was involved. There's already so much evidence out there. I don't know why they, just drop it all, get it done, get it over with, sort of thing. Seems to me there's enough information just to start bringing people in, charging them. Most of them will sing like birds and cut deals, and you'll get it all, So the investigation continues to branch out and get larger. Now they're going to relook at the Clinton investigation and the Clinton Foundation itself. I mean, I would wrap up this investigation, finish this off, let everyone know what happened, and then pass off the Clinton Foundation investigation to someone else. Bring in a special counsel, let one of these U.S. attorneys in another state begin that as a separate investigation or whatever. We already know that the FBI let the rotten Reverend Clinton off the hook. Everyone knows that. And I think that that's the main reason they're looking at it, because they want to show the contrast. Here's what they did to Trump. Here's what they did to Clinton. Well, that's been investigated to hell and back. That information's already there. Buy Peter Schweizer's book, and there you go. Just go into court and read the damn book. They've already verified, the DOJ lawyers have already verified, FBI investigators have already verified that practically everything in Schweizer's book is true. So you've got enough to prove. We know about the server. We know about the emails. They may have Weiner's hard drive, the copy of his hard drive. There's another 600 plus thousand emails that were probably many of them containing classified information that fell into the hands of Anthony's Weiner. And God knows who hacked into it from there. So there's already plenty of evidence. I mean, we already know that they let the rotten Reverend Clinton off the hook and they went after Trump. That's you know. But anyway, that is what's going on. I guess another thing about this is that Barr said that politics would not determine the course of the investigation. But, you know, if you're going to come out and say and make a statement that, well, it would be deemed as too political to come out now, this close to the election, well, now you're allowing politics to be an issue. If the idea was we're not going to let the politics of the election affect at all what we're going to do, we're just going to do our investigation when the time is right. We're going to indict or we're not going to indict. We're going to act or we're not going to act. We're not going to pay any attention to politics and elections. That apparently is out the window because apparently the reason that Maria Bartiromo said that they're not going to do anything is because too close to the election. Well, that means, in other words, a political reason. They're going to hold off. They're going to change and do something they would normally do because of the election. That's political. So anyway, I think that kind of shoots that down. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I mean, it's again, I mean, the politics of it, you can't, of course there's politics involved in it. There's no way. The idea that you can avoid the politics of it is impossible. Of course there's going to be politics around it, regardless of what you do, whether you come out with a report or indictments or not. Either way, it's going to cut politically, even if you don't want it to or intend it to. It's impossible. It's completely wrapped in politics. You know, it's the whole thing itself was a political exercise. You can't separate it from the politics, particularly a month before the election. So, you know, I'm not happy about it, but it's probably the right thing to do. I mean, it's a wild card. When you throw that wild card out there, you don't know how it's gonna turn out. And it doesn't mean that right after the election. First of all, I'm pretty confident that Trump's going to win. I think that Barr must feel that way. Trump probably feels that way, I'm sure. And even if Biden were to win, they still have some time, a few weeks, that they could drop some indictments, bring some charges or whatever, just to make sure the investigation doesn't get completely wiped away. Because it most likely would. I'm almost certain of that would happen. So, again, it's not what we all wanted to hear, but that is the way it is. And I do believe that the most important thing to focus on, I mean, we've been waiting over 3 years to get to the bottom of this. We've learned a lot of things. I think if they were going to sweep this under the rug and not bring indictments, they would not be dropping so much damning information. They would be hiding that information. So I don't believe this is, you know, a cover-up or whatever. And I don't believe Barr is part of the deep state that's going to try to withhold this, and he's secretly working behind the scenes to help Trump lose or something so they can make this all go away. That I don't buy into that at all. I know that's out there, people saying that kind of thing. I don't believe it. I think there's other things going on we just don't know. I think it could have something to do with they're a little concerned about would it increase the riots? You know, I mean, maybe they're not set up right now in place to handle. Because when they announce this and they start bringing down people like Comey, especially if it gets into Obama's administration, you know, you could be talking some major riots and things. So I think it's just it's a powder keg right now that they don't want to set that off in the weeks before an election. I think, like I said before, the hardest thing Barr has to deal with is how do you do this? If you are going to take down these players, you can bet that there's going to be, you know, a lot of blowback from it. And it's how you do it. It's very tricky, taking down these people. There are a lot of powerful people behind them. And it's very tricky. And to try to do it in conjunction with an election that's this politically charged, and now we have a Supreme Court nomination process going on at the same time, that's just too many things in the powder keg, I think. And that's probably what's guiding Barr's decision, is he's probably concerned about losing control of the streets, quite honestly. And I think that probably has a lot to do with things. And he's hoping maybe after the election that a lot of the wind will be out of the Democrat sails, because let's face it, there's nothing they can really do to stop Amy Coney Barrett. If the votes are there, and McConnell says and Graham says they got the 51 votes right now, they could have the vote tomorrow and they'd have the votes. So the Democrats and their base are going to be extremely defeated and demoralized once she is seated, especially if it's 2-3 weeks before the election. They will be extremely demoralized because they were counting on her not being there if they challenge these elections in the courts. And the Democratic base will be demoralized. And then on top of that, if Trump wins, especially if he wins in a fairly large landslide election, the Democrats will be totally demoralized. They will have lost the Supreme Court. It will be a 6-3 court, at least for the next few years, and probably before Trump leaves office, it will be a 7-2 court when he replaces Judge Souter, who will likely be replaced before Trump's second term ends. So they know that the long game, Democrats and the Democrat politicians or voters, they know for the long game they have been defeated, and that will be extremely demoralizing. Really nothing they can do about it that's politically viable. And that's the big victory that we need to look at. And then, of course, if Trump wins in a fairly large landslide, and I believe he will, I believe he'll be close to 400 electoral college points as long as it's a fair election. I believe he'll keep all the states he turned blue last time, from blue to red, will stay red. I think there's 2 or 3 more states he could flip. I think he's going to get more votes from blacks and Hispanics than any Republican has gotten since Lincoln. So I think right now Trump and Barr probably think they're in a good place, and they probably don't want to risk. And we haven't heard Trump comment on this yet. I'm sure he will. Trump will comment on this, and we'll find out what he thinks. Because ultimately, you can bet that this week, I mean, he talks to Barr every day practically. You can bet that at some point this week, Trump will be talking to Barr, and he's certainly going to want an explanation. And I'm sure Barr will give that to him. And we'll have to see what Trump's response to it is. That'll tell us a lot. But while we may not like it now, it may turn out to have been the right call. So we will just watch and see. It's going to be an extraordinary week and an extraordinary next couple of weeks. Right now, we've got to focus on getting the judge seated and winning the election. That's the 2 things right now that we absolutely must focus on. And then the day after the election, we will get back to the story and apply as much pressure as we can. So that's my thoughts on things. I'll be back tomorrow, I assume, with another video, and we'll see where things are. Thanks for tuning in. Guys, take care. See you. Bye.